Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Right. So without further ado, we've got five wonderful women that I'm going to introduce you to today. I'm going to start with Claire Ruggiero. So Claire is also on the steering group at supporting the regional hub, and Claire works for DMV. I'm not going to say any more because I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves. So Claire, let's start with you. A
Thanks,
few
Jill.
words. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So I work for DNV, which is Det Norske Veritas. So it's a Norwegian company, but it's a very large global risk and safety organization. And we really support the marine industry, energy systems, and supply chain industries. But I work in the rail division, hence, being interested in women in transport. And we work on projects that look at safety and performance of railway systems around the world throughout the life cycle of those systems. Now, my role, I'm the global rail systems lead within the rail business within DNV. And that means I support the teams globally, all the way from Korea to Brazil, to grow and develop the business and so help our customers to deliver safe and sustainable rail transportation. That's me.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Claire. If I call upon Philippa, so Philippa, can I ask you to introduce yourself, Philippa Hammersley?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. I apologise if it's a bit echoey in the room I'm in today. I'm actually sat in one of our depots. So I am an account director for Balfour Beatty. I think many people are familiar with the name, but in one of the largest, if not the largest, infrastructure contractor in the UK. Specifically, I work in the south area, so I look after the southwest and all the way across to the southeast, quite a large geography. But what an account director does in our business is look after our existing customers, nurture those relationships and support our project teams through the whole project life cycle, and also looking from a perhaps more traditional business development perspective, what future pipeline and repeat business particularly we can do with those customers. And just picking up on Claire's sort of broader explanation of services and sort of why transport, a big part of what we do in my business is highways, sustainable transport, active travel, and I work very closely with our rail business as well in delivering all sorts and all forms of transport and infrastructure projects across the south. So that is me.
Thank you very much. That's wonderful, Philippa. I'm going to introduce you now to Jade Edwards. Jade, over to you.
Thanks, Jill. Hi, everyone. I'm Jade. I'm from ZapMap. We are the UK's largest leading EV charging app. So we help EV drivers to search, plan, and pay for charging through the ZapMap app. We are a Bristol-based business. And my role within ZapMap is I am head of insights. So I lead a sub-brand called ZapMap Insights. And what we do is we take all the amazing data that sits behind the ZapMap app and look at how we can use that in a more B2B context. So how can we create products and services for the wider industry to help the whole industry electrify, whether that's fleet companies, charge point operators. We provide the Department for Transport with our data, so it is used for the official statistics on the number of charge points that there are in the UK at any one time. And we also work with media in response to requests from journalists and that kind of thing, and doing thought leadership pieces as well. So there's a whole kind of ecosystem around that EV charging data, and that's where my role sits.
Fantastic. It's just amazing to just see the diversity in the roles around transport. So it's wonderful. So thank you very much, Jade. And Claire. So Claire Woolley, aka Claire Jones, and we just discussed about how challenging it is when you get married and then you're wanting to be known by your name. So Claire, over to you.
Yeah, so I am Chief Risk and Legal Officer at the RAC. Most people know the RAC as the breakdown company, which is still, our biggest area of business, but we also have mobile mechanics, We have B2B offerings that support lots of large companies keeping their vehicles moving and dealing with their vehicles when they're off-road. My role in particular, I like to think all the exciting teams in the business work for me. So we're talking risk, we're talking legal, compliance, health and safety, internal audit, COSEC, and quality assurance. So, the glamorous end of things is where we sit. We've obviously got a big Bristol office that most people have passed at some point when they go down the M5 or across the M4, which I spend most of my time in because that's where my teams are based. We do also have obviously the one on the M6 as well, which is actually more local to where I live, but I spend less time there because it's quite an operational site. I also sit on the executive board, so I'm part of forming our strategy and making sure that we're kind of seeing the future coming and evolving our strategy as the world of transport evolves, and that we're responding to those needs and identifying both risks and opportunities in that sector. So yeah, keeps me out of trouble.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Claire. And lastly, I'm going to introduce the person who's actually going to be doing the probing questions today, which is Joelle. So I'm going to let Joelle introduce herself, and she sat next to me, so I'm going to swap the camera over to her. So there you go, Joelle.
Hello, everyone. My name is Joelle. I am a graduate engineer at WSP, and I am also the secretary for the IC Bristol City Club, and I'm your host for today. So it's lovely to see that we have such a diverse panel of inspiring women today. And I actually have a burning question that I need to ask Claire really now. What do you love about your job?
What do I love about my job? No 2 days are the same. In fact, sometimes it feels like no 2 minutes are the same. I never quite know what's going to cross my desk. But what I really love about it is working in an organisation. I'm sure the other panel members will also recognise this. Is transport is really fundamental to a lot of people's lives. For various different reasons, whether it be professional or personal, it's so important to people's lives. And we at the RAC rescue people. We rescue people. Everything that I do every day is ultimately about keeping people going, rescuing them when they're at a point in time where they need us to keep them going, and sometimes quite terrifying situations. I don't know if you've ever broken down on the motorway. It's not nice. So yeah, that's the biggest thing that I love about it, followed very closely by the culture that we have at the RAC and the people that I work with, who are just so passionate and committed to, again, keeping people moving and giving people peace of mind.
Amazing. And does anyone else want to share what they love about the jobs?
Yeah, I think I just pick up on what Claire said around the people, working with amazing people, especially for me around the world, people from different cultures, different backgrounds, different perspectives. I think that's amazing. And it makes my day really varied. The other thing I was just going to say, it just sparked an idea, Claire, was around the complexity of transportation systems. And we can see each of us have different sort of perspectives on that, but everything has to work together. And I'm an engineer, and those complex problems that you've got to figure out on a railway, well, yeah, Philippa, you can imagine, that as well. These infrastructures are so complex. And from the engineering problem solving, mindset, that's a massive challenge and a massive buzz that you can get in working on those problems and challenges.
Yeah, I'd build on that, Claire, absolutely. What was going through my mind was that problem solving bit, and maybe that's just very much me, but I really enjoy working with the customers and going, what are you trying to achieve and how do I connect you to the right people? Because I'm not an engineer, and I won't pretend to be the very clever person that's going to work out those engineering problems, but I know who can. And so I sort of see myself as a bit of a conduit to those experts within our organizations, with our supply chain, other partners, designers, whatever it might be. It's how do I bring the best of this amazing industry to those customers who are trying to solve a problem. So I would absolutely agree with that. I
think one of my favorite things is being in EV, is being in such an emerging industry as well. So there's so many aspects to transport, but EV is just, it is, it's the new kid on the block, really. So that's really, really exciting, is how everything's growing and evolving and changing day to day.
Yeah, Jade, I like what you just said, and I want to ask you, what was your first ever job?
So my first ever job was working in a convenience store. Behind the till, there was a deli section, so I worked on the deli section as well. And actually, my favourite bit about it was working on a deli on a Sunday night and actually cleaning it all down. Don't know why, but I loved the satisfaction of it all being left really nicely. And my boss used to work a Monday morning, and he used to say it was his favourite time of the week because he'd come in and everything was absolutely where it should be and pristine. That was kind of his favourite. So yeah, that was my first ever job. So yeah, far away from transport. But yeah.
Do you feel like any of the skills that you've gained from your first job are something that you're still using today?
I think there's stuff that it sort of feeds all the way through, really. For me, a key thing that I loved there and that I've always loved, and actually things that I loved as a child, was about kind of organizing and pulling stuff together, and kind of getting to a point of a finished article. And that has gone absolutely all the way through my career in every job, is that when I'm happiest is when I'm pulling lots of different things together and being able to say, right, we've done this, we've achieved this, let's move on to the next thing. So yeah, I think that's definitely something I learned there, and it's just gone all the way through my career.
Amazing. What about you, Claire? Claire Rail.
Claire Rail. I love it. Yeah, well, a similar, my very, very first job was a summer job at Topshop. So I'm really showing my age now. But yes, in retail, on the shop floor, selling, I think I was on the shoe section, which is probably the worst section because you bring the shoes out to try on people's feet. But yeah, it was, and your question about skills I've learned, it's a tough, tough, tough job. And I'm sure, also if you were working in catering or that sort of thing, you realize how tough those jobs are. And I'm so grateful and kind, to people who are working in those jobs now, because I know it's really thankless in a way. You get a lot of input from customers directly. So yeah, I probably learned that there are some really tough jobs, and to be grateful and thankful to all those people doing all the jobs around, and actually thinking about transportation itself. When you go to catch a train or you go to catch a bus, there's all these people who've made it happen and made it work, and being grateful and thankful for that, I think, is a good skill to take forwards.
Amazing. What about you, Claire Willie?
First of all, I'm very jealous because Topshop would have been a really cool first job. That I would have loved that. Mine was very similar to Jade's. I worked on the checkout in Summerfield, in an area of Birmingham that is called Wheelie Castle, which makes it sound very glamorous. And I can tell you it is absolutely the opposite of glamorous. But I learned so much from that job about myself, about the world, about people, and probably things that I didn't know at the time I was learning, but masses about privilege. I didn't grow up in a, hugely wealthy background or anything like that, but I had not appreciated up until that point how much some people can struggle. And when you're having to uncheck something because people haven't got the cash when they've done a whole load of shopping through, and watching people facing those everyday things when you're 15, that's quite eye-opening. And the fact that I hated the job, but for me it was a short-term thing and I got to leave, where there were lots of people there, that was their life and that was their jobs for the foreseeable future. Again, it makes you grateful, to use Claire's word, it makes you really grateful when you've got a job that you love and you get a lot out of, but also for your wider privilege in the wider context of society.
Felipa?
Well, similar actually to Claire and Jade, a supermarket. It was actually Waitrose, so going to the other end of the spectrum. But talking about that, I think even in that context, it's quite an aspirational brand. It is aspirational for many people to be able to afford to shop in there, to go and buy themselves a treat. You know, at the age of 16, it was I can shop in there, but I'd, you know, treat myself to something nice. And I worked behind the deli counter and the patisserie counters. And I suppose probably a couple of things that I've, as you said, Claire, I probably can reflect on now that I learned, maybe didn't know in the time. I think building on that people side, I loved being on the counters. It was stressful at times on a busy Saturday morning, but it was also fun. It was a good team, but I also very early on realized I could be the only point of contact for somebody in their day. And actually that front-facing customer role, and taking the time to respond to a conversation and not just process their product and really understand a little bit of what was going on for them, and particularly the elderly. I remember one lady who was so lovely, and that was her routine. She'd come in every Saturday morning and she'd come and chat to us girls behind the counter, and she'd always buy something, but it could have been her only point of contact for the day. And I that really sort of stuck with me forever around engagements with people and recognizing you don't always know what's going on for that person, and that can be exhibited, you know, into the workplace. Now that can exhibit in someone's behavior, and it's very easy to respond to their behavior in an instant and wonder why they're behaving like that, but not realizing what's going on for them. So that was a big learning, as well as just that customer salesy side of things. And you know, for me, it wasn't cleaning down, although I did the satisfaction of cleaning down the patisserie. It gets all goopy and sugary. But Jade, I recognise that, the enjoyment of looking at it being pristine. But when I was given free rein to like set the patisserie up for Easter, and it was like, go and take stuff off the shop floor and put a load of, you know, display. And my creative side came out and we sold a ton of cakes that day. You know, I know how to, I've sort of learnt that, how to appeal to the customer, how to really engage, and that was a sales job at the end of the day. Even though at the age of 16 you felt like you were just earning a wage to go home and, you know, go to Topshop and buy that top you really wanted.
Amazing. But now, how about your first professional jobs? Let's go with Jade.
So my first professional job was actually at the NSPCC. So I got a job there as soon as I finished uni in London, and basically as a temporary job because I was staying in London for another year while my partner was doing his final year at uni. So I worked at the NSPCC on the helpline. And so sort of my job was, when initial calls came in, was to basically field that call and try and push it through to one of our social workers. Or if everybody was unavailable, then to sort of give other numbers and basically field that call out. And then there was various other bits of admin, like kind of behind the scenes that followed on afterwards. But it was that kind of crucial piece of actually you are on the front line of taking these calls and getting them through to somebody or getting them another number as quickly as possible. But yeah, so that was my first kind of professional job once I came out of uni.
And how did you get into transport?
Yeah, so my route into transport from there was I moved then to Bristol, and I got a job with a company that worked for insurance companies, so for motor insurance companies, and had a network of physiotherapists across the UK. And we basically, the insurance company, when somebody had an accident and had, say, whiplash, they would refer them to us, and we would then get them an appointment with a physio and kind of follow that treatment process through. So that was my first sort of step in, was working with the motor insurers. And then I went on from there to work with motor insurers in a data and insights capacity. So basically collecting a company that collected a lot of data on insurance pricing. And then from there, then came to ZapMap because they were looking for someone to grow their data and insights business. So I didn't have to have EV experience. It was about the data and insights experience. And I kind of, my link in was that I did understand motor insurance and that kind of background and process.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting because we can see that we don't necessarily have to have a background in transport to actually work in transport. So I'm curious to know about the others ladies. Philippa, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. My first professional job was temping for Balfour Beatty, and I never left. No, I did briefly, but I've been here an awful long time. So I temped in the HR department for Balfour Beatty at their Basingstoke office, so not in the southwest, but not that far. It was a by chance placement that resulted in me applying for a graduate role with them in HR. That's how I started my career with them. And then I ultimately moved into work winning for them after a few years because I showed an interest in coming up with sort of proposals, and I'm not bad at writing. And so the proposals director was like, brilliant, come and work for us for a while. And I thought, well, if I hate it, I'll go back to HR, but I'll do it for a bit. It's good for my experience. So I haven't turned back, and it went from bid management to business development and then account management as we see it in our business now. So it's 17 years of Balfour's, but a really broad experience. Very fortunate in that business that I've gone, whether it's been highways maintenance, which is where I started out, through to now in our kind of what we call our regional civils business, so doing bigger projects. But I've worked at group level, delivering ISO 44001 collaborative working certifications. I've done, I've been involved in some really big group-wide projects that's exposed me to lots of different parts of transport, major projects, rail, and everything else. And even our EV team, who we now have with Urban Fox. So I've been very fortunate with Balfour's that I've been able to carve out quite a squiggly career with them, with the safety net of knowing the business. I've been able to sort of move around, but yeah, all started from a temp job, and I don't think I even knew who Balfour Beatty was when I went to work for them. I think I had to Google them and find out what they did. So yeah, I'm not from a family of engineers or kind of transport or infrastructure background at all. So it was a by chance, but then grab the opportunities where I could find them and go from there.
Amazing. Claire, really?
Yeah, so my first job out of uni was a trainee solicitor, which was, I'd done law at uni. It was sort of the path that, was well trodden at that point. So at the time, we used to do a 2-year training contract and do kind of 6-month placements in different specialties of law with a view to qualifying at the end of the 2 years as a solicitor. What clearly wasn't, directed just at transport. We had all kinds of, major corporate clients, lots of consumer-facing businesses, lots of public sector organisations. And I was really lucky during that period that I got exposed to a load of different sectors, and some of them were in transport. I can't say that at the time when I was working with transport clients, I thought, this is it, I want to work in transport. But what I did find during that period was that I really loved the element of working within the business, working really closely with one business so that you got to understand the strategy in the industry. So I knew I wanted to work within a business rather than in a law firm where I started out. And when I eventually made that transition into the RAC, the world of transport and financial services kind of opened up a bit before me. And I had never thought about so many of the things I was then having to think about in terms of what keeps transportation going and all the complexities behind the scenes. I still learn about the complexities every single day. And to me, that's part of what keeps it exciting.
Yeah, Claire? Or
yes, yeah, I did chemical engineering at university, and when I left there, I went to a small consulting company that was working in safety and risk. It was just at the time, again, showing my age, after Piper Alpha disaster, they brought in a lot of regulations into the oil and gas industry, which meant they needed to do safety cases and more formal risk assessments and documentation of the controls that they had in place. And so the company I was working for was doing all of that early work around the safety case development to these new regulations. So yeah, that's where I started my first professional job, in that safety and risk. And again, like we saw, actually, not in transport at all, but in oil and gas. I was a chemical engineer. Well, I am a chemical engineer. But yes, I think those transferable skills across into transport, because it is so complex and there's so many different aspects, actually, you can find your place easily, I think.
Yeah, Claire,
Yeah.
you mentioned you're working in real right now, and real can seem like a very male-dominated environment. Has anyone ever said or done something that made you feel like they were an ally in encouraging diversity in the workplace?
Yeah, I think I think every day, I think you have your supporters or people who sort of amplify your voices. I would say I haven't, felt discriminated against, or, at any point not welcoming the industry. So I think there is definitely that in the transportation industry. Mostly people are really friendly and open and, happy to get to know you as a person. I think actually, thinking about your question around an ally to maybe women as a whole, a lot of the events that I go to are very male sort of dominated, and as maybe a single woman going into those environments, it can feel a bit daunting, especially if you don't know anybody. And last year I was working with one of the organisers of one of these large events. We just had the other event on Friday, which is about 1,300 people come to this event, and we just talks about how we could make all people welcome to that event, and feel that it was a place for them and not excluded. And so I think those organisations and people within those organisations who really, I suppose, systemically and organisationally take those actions, I think those are the really massive impactful sort of allies to build and have. I think women in transport is maybe an example of that. But yeah, throughout my career, those organisations really can create systemic change.
Does anyone else have had a different experience?
I mean, I think I've been lucky enough to work with a number of hugely inspiring men and women, and a number of them, again, men and women, have been hugely kind of understanding of the challenges that you can face when you're in a massively male-dominated environment. And what's interesting to me, having not started out in transport, but actually started out in a law firm, which weirdly the dynamics in law firms are that it's 50-50 at entry level, but as soon as you get to senior level, it gets down to 80-20, male dominated really quickly. And then move into financial services, which is massively male dominated, in the sector of transport, which is also massively male dominated. It's a real kind of range of experiences there. And I would just echo what Claire has said, really. I think the transport side of things, compared to kind of pure legal services and financial services, is a more welcoming environment, I think, and a more supportive environment than potentially legal services and financial services in and of themselves are still these days. And I think, the way that people show allyship is sometimes not necessarily through organised networks like this. It's individuals spotting when somebody might be struggling with an issue and taking the time to talk to you and say, I've been where you are. This is how I dealt with it. It either went badly or it didn't. It went well. Learn from my experience. I'm here to talk to you if you want to. To me, those are my most powerful experiences.
Philippa, I see you nodding.
Yeah, I think it's I think I've been very fortunate to find those allies along the way. I think I don't think I've ever felt a real sort of isolation for being quite often the only woman in the room, and that can still be the case. I think I only noticed it the other day and thought, oh, yeah, maybe I'm immune to it and I don't see it anymore. And maybe that's a confidence in me after a number of years that I don't I don't think about it, and that I feel like I've earned my seat at the table. So it doesn't matter whether I'm a woman or not. And maybe it's also a mix of some really good allies, women and men in the business, who make that a very accepting and accessible environment to be in. I think I would sort of build, as you said, Claire, I think I'd probably build on that with example of I've definitely had allies who will notice the person in the room, and this is whether it's a gender thing or just a personality type thing. And that there is too much dominance of one character type or one voice in the room, and they will make space for that person that's quieter. They will make space for them to engage, and when it's needed and without embarrassment, put a pause on someone overbearing somebody else. And I think I certainly experienced that. I wouldn't want to talk for every woman, but I've certainly experienced being spoken over, being interrupted, being, that cross talking, because or you say something and it sort of somewhat gets shot down or ignored, and then a man says it 2 minutes later in a slightly different way, and everyone goes, "Oh, what a good idea, that's great, let's go with that." And the sheer frustration and having to sort of just bear with it and go, "Okay, it's all right, I'll get my moment at some point and I'll work out how to navigate this." I think having allies and finding your people, you're a bit of a tribe in the workplace, to give you people to talk to and share those frustrations with, and then kind of process it and go, okay, I can't change other people immediately and in the moment, but I can change my response to it and how I cope with that situation or navigate that situation differently. So those kind of coaches and mentors, that very unofficial ones that I've found along the way, have been really helpful to me.
How about you, Jade?
And the only other thing I'd add, I suppose, from an EV perspective is, yes, it's still more male dominated. However, we've just got some really incredible female leaders in the EV space. So at ZapMap, Mel is one of our co-founders and our COO. And she heads up the business, and she heads up all the, she is the kind of the face in terms of all the thought leadership and all that side of things. And so she's so well known and respected within the industry, which is just absolutely incredible and really inspirational. And then we've got an organisation called Charge UK, who have brought together kind of all the charge point operators, and that's headed up by an incredible woman as well. So there are some, really fantastic female leaders out there who are really inspirational. I'm really trying to lift up everybody else as well. And there's, great networks that I'm part of, where it's, the women in EV, and, we've even got a WhatsApp group, and everybody's really lifting each other up and pointing each other in the right direction of different opportunities and things that are going on. I just think that's really, really important in the growing industry as well.
Well, speaking of women in EV, I saw on LinkedIn that you've been shortlisted as one of the top women in EV. Huge congratulations for that.
Thank you. Thank you. Very exciting.
Okay, so this is an open question. I just want to ask, did you ever feel pressure to fit in and conform, to be accepted? Yeah. I see you, Claire.
I absolutely did. And yeah, when I started as a trainee solicitor when I was 22, I walked through the door and just felt like a complete fish out of water. These were people from different backgrounds from me, largely from a different type of university, from me, lots of Oxbridge people. I just felt like a complete fish out of water, that everybody else knew what they were doing and I had no idea. I was the first person in my family to go to university or even have an office job. Everybody else had done very manual jobs. So the whole thing, I hadn't realised until I walked through that door just quite how different this was going to feel. And I spent a long time trying to be what I thought I was supposed to be, what I thought a lawyer was supposed to behave like, supposed to look like, supposed to speak like, supposed to dress like. And it made me really unhappy, and also not very good at my job, because I wasn't being me. I wasn't, embracing actually what I was good at and what I really could bring to the table.
Mm.
It was a hiding to nothing that, I learned a huge amount from, but I probably spent 4 or 5 years trying to fit myself into this hole that I did not quite fit into.
Mm. Amazing. So moving on to another question. So let's come back to you, Jade. I'm interested to know what skills got you to where you are today, and what skill are you looking to master?
I think, as I sort of alluded to earlier, I think the skill that sort of led me where I am today is this ability to coordinate, bring people together around a common goal, and kind of set the direction, and then really enable people to do their best work, and work together really well. One of my colleagues, we did some interviews recently, and one of the things he said, and I was like, oh, okay, I'd never really thought about that myself, was that I develop a team that's more than the sum of its parts, because I don't look at, it's not like cookie cutters. I don't look for people that are just like me.
Mm.
I really try and bring in people that have, quite a diverse range of skills and things that I'm not particularly good at, or it's not the way I approach things. They're very different to me. So I think that's kind of what's got me where I am today, is being able to see that and see the benefit that actually having really diverse viewpoints and really diverse approaches brings to a team. And I think it's just something that I've always kind of done, but not realized that that's kind of what has worked really well for me.
Mm, mm, mm.
If
Yeah,
I
we
can
can see.
build on that, sorry, just to interject. I think, again, that point is almost exactly the same point as how I was feeling at the outset. I was not good at my job because I was trying to do something and be something that I wasn't. The minute I kind of went, do you know what, I think I'm going to have to get a different job because I hate it, and started being myself and using my natural talents, people were like, there's something different about you. And it's not just that you're no longer wearing a grey suit, you're wearing bright red lipstick and an orange jumper, which was part of the process, or that your authentic Brummy accent is coming out. It was just that I was more comfortable in my own skin and kind of more comfortable going, I'm good at this. I'm not so good at this. I need help with this bit. I'm going to surround myself with a bunch of people who are good at the things that I'm not good at. And suddenly, the reaction I was getting, the work that I was producing, the way people perceived me was entirely different. And that team kind of, you don't have to be perfect at everything. You have to make sure that you have all of those things covered, and that collectively you are rounded is just so vital to all of that. And I really recognize what you say there, Jade, and the fact that you're so good at it means that I'm going to give some, hopefully follow up with some tips about how you identify those missing parts, because I think it's always a work in progress, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, okay. So I'm checking the time. So I want to talk about career growth. And I have a question for you, Philippa. How did you navigate your career?
Oh, big question. I think I alluded it to earlier. I think I'm a bit of a gut person rather than a planner. I'll be honest. I think there's loads of great, theories and books and approaches out there that, I aspire to use one day. I always dreaded the "where do you see yourself in 5 years' time" question in an interview, because I'm like, oh, I don't really know, very honestly. And I think, it's the old joke of, what do you want to do when you grow up? Well, I still don't know, and I'm 41. I think I have at the heart of it, through my studies, I remember, I think it was one of my teachers actually, she said, do what you enjoy. And my dad always used to say those, like, do what you enjoy, study what you enjoy, and invariably you'll be good at it because you enjoy it, and you'll put yourself into it because you enjoy it. And I've sort of taken that all the way through. I've taken opportunities when they've been there. They've been a bit scary sometimes. I've definitely been out of my comfort zone. I've definitely felt imposter syndrome and thought, oh gosh, someone's seeing something in me that I don't quite see in myself, but maybe I just need to go with it. And I have had, even though I'm not a planner and I couldn't say this is my goal for 5 years and this is how I'm going to get there. And I admire people who do that. And I, advocate for that if that works for you. I
Mm,
do self-reflect. I do have those moments of intention where I go,
mm,
am I happy? Am I enjoying this? Is
mm,
this still fulfilling something in me?
mm,
And if it's not, and I had one of those situations maybe 4 years ago, and I moved. I was really honest with my line manager, and I said,
mm,
I could keep doing this, but this is turning the handle for me, and I need challenge. And I'm not saying I
mm,
need an upward step. I might want a sideways step, but I need something different. This isn't enough. And he recognized that in me and was like, fine, no problem. Let's go and see what we can find you and see
mm.
what else is going on in the business. Want to keep you in the group kind of conversation, which was lovely, really helpful. But I had thought about, stepping out and doing something wildly different because I got into that sort of lull of not enjoying this. So I think I listen to my gut. I listen to my measure is, am I challenged? Because that's when I'm at my best. Stress is one thing, being stretched is another, and I don't mind being stretched. I just
Mm,
don't want to be, waking up in the middle of the night panicking about the next day. We all have those days and weeks and maybe even months, but continually not good for you. And I think I've learned to I was about to say, I think I've learned to say no. I'm not sure I have. I'm getting better at it. So I'm trying to say yes to the things that I know work for me,
mm.
and be really honest when I don't think that's going to either be good for me or I'm not going to be right for it. So, yeah, that was a bit of a long-winded answer. Sorry,
No,
Jane.
no, that was really good. Thank you, Claire. Real.
Yeah, yeah, really similar. I think it's really
Mm,
fascinating to hear from all we haven't met each other before as a panel, but there's
mm,
definitely these common threads that come through because
mm,
I'm exactly like you, Philippa. I didn't have a plan. I've never had a plan. I've
mm,
just seen opportunities and thought, that looks interesting. I'll go over there and I'll
mm.
do that.
Yeah.
And most of the time it's worked out. Maybe sometimes it doesn't work out, but you find something else. So I
Mm,
think that enjoying what you do and going for there's it's something interesting, I'm going to try it out, like you say, Philippa, sometimes the risk, sometimes a bit of a can I do it or not do it, but yeah, it's exactly. And was it you who said that squiggly line? It's
mm,
never been a plan. It has never been a step of this after this after this for me anyway. It's been a squiggly line, and yeah, it's worked out. I think the important thing is to enjoy it and grab all the opportunities that you can. Or a couple of times in my career, I've actually made opportunities as well to say,
mm,
okay, there's a gap there. I think I could do something there, and a role gets created because you've identified that gap. So
mm.
so yeah, I think there's definitely this. I love that
It's
squiggly. There's
squiggly
been a
line.
squiggly line.
Yeah, and that's very interesting because when we talk about growth, most of the time we think about from the bottom up, while it can be moving from one department to another, even if it's a different field, but it's still growth because growth is personal. So I think that's really, really interesting. Jade?
Yeah, the one thing I was going to add to that was the start of my career and where I
Mm,
am now. There was one thing that was intentional was that at the very start when I worked for the NSPCC was
mm,
I wanted to do something that I felt I had real purpose, and that was just a temp job, but I was like, oh, I'm really interested in this. And then when I first started looking for something when we were going to be moving to Bristol, I was trying to find something that had
mm,
that kind of real purpose about it.
mm,
And I ended up in something that didn't particularly have that.
mm,
And then it took me a long time to get back to it, actually. And it was something that I then looked for several years,
mm,
trying to make a move that got me into something that I felt was more purpose driven. And
mm,
I did find that very difficult. Um, and eventually it worked out, and the ZapMap opportunity came up, and it absolutely nailed that purpose side of it for me. But I looked for years
mm,
actually to find my next move. And really struggled to make that crossover because I used to find I'd get quite far in the interview process and people would go, you're a great cultural fit, you know, think you've got loads of transferable skills, blah, 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 blah. But we're going to give this job to someone that has come from this industry or has done this exact job before. Generally for me, it ended up always being a middle-aged white guy. So that really annoyed me because it was the same thing every single time. And I was like, why? Why is it every time? But I think that was just my experience. I don't think that's, you know, generally everybody. But it did take me a long time to make that move back into something more purposeful. And that is the one bit of advice I would give someone starting out, is if there's something like that, there's something cultural or there's something like that you really want to fulfill, then go for that aspect, and kind of the other things, you'll find your role, you'll find your way through the squiggly lines, but sometimes it's hard to make that sort of transition if you've sort of left that gap in between and gone in a different direction.
That's fabulous. Thank you. Thank you for that. So we're going to have a little session, if you like, in breakout rooms, which creates an opportunity for other people to ask questions and make some comments. So by the wonders of magic, Steve is going to be doing that for us now, who is the events coordinator for Women in Transport. We're going to stop recording, so don't panic about that. And it would be great if you put your videos on so that we can see you when we're in the breakout rooms. When we come back for the last 5 minutes, I'm going to give my panelists that thought now. We're going to ask you, what would you say to your younger self if you were able to give them a piece of advice? So that last kind of nugget will come back at the end for. Okay, so Steve, when you're ready, you can stop the